we're going to talk about how to customize the potting mix, and we're going to use some recipes that are from Marc Hachadourian's book, Orchid Modern, and they are a really good place to start, and then you can go from there and customize the potting mixes even further so that you can get the very best results for your orchid and your growing environment. So here's the book. Marc Hachadourian, Orchid Modern. He is the curator for the orchid collection at the New York Botanical Garden. So I thought he would be a good place to start. So for this terrestrial mix, what we are going to use is 2 parts medium fir bark. So this is what medium fir bark looks like. And it's about 1 inch or so, most pieces. Okay, maybe a little bit smaller for some. And then the other piece is 1 part fine bark. And you can see that these pieces are quite a bit smaller. So for this first recipe right here, it's a terrestrial orchid mix, and it's really good for Paphiopedilums, Phragmipediums, and even small-rooted Cattleyas and small-rooted Oncidiums. Okay, and also I wanted to add, when we talk about parts, we're talking about volume, not weight. Okay, so far we have 2 parts medium bark and 1 part fine bark, and then we're going to use 1 part sponge rock. Okay, so this is the sponge rock, and sponge rock is basically perlite, only the pieces are larger. Okay. And then 1 part horticulture charcoal. Charcoal is really nice because it does absorb some salt. So they have kind of a filtration system kind of built into their properties. So here is the container that I'm going to mix it in. And I'm going to put on gloves because some of this stuff is very messy. It can be a really good idea to rinse the materials that you're going to use in advance to keep the dust down. So 2 parts medium fir bark. I'm just going to add 2 cups here. 1, 2, and then 1 part of the fine. And then 1 part sponge rock. Let's see if this... and 1 part horticulture charcoal. Okay, so here we have a basic mix for Paphiopedilums or Phragmipediums, small-rooted Oncidiums, small-rooted Cattleyas. So I want to show you how we can now kind of customize this mix. So for example, I just watched a video from Jason Fisher at Orchid Web, and he likes to pot his Phragmipediums in wool rock. So if you would like to add some more moisture to your potting mix, make it a little bit more damp, then you can take these bits of rock wool and kind of break it up into pieces and mix it in. Okay, so another example, let me show you. So I have this Paphnipedium and Phragmipedium mix from Repot Me. It's really good, and I can look at it and I can see pieces of sponge rock. I can see that it also has, looks like it's a medium size to small bark, and then it also has some Alifor. It's also known as Leca. Repot Me sells it as Hydrotone, and this was actually given to me by Repot Me, so a big shout out to them and thank you for the Hydrotone. So you can also add a bit of this Hydrotone to it. Okay, and that will also help it last longer because the Hydrotone doesn't break down, so it kind of opens up the potting mix a bit more. It does absorb salt, but then you also have the horticulture charcoal that helps to filter. Another thing that you can add if you wanted to open it up a bit are these chunks. This is medium-sized cork. This is also from Repot Me. It's very lightweight and it can last for a long time on a slab if you have a slab of cork, but if it starts to break down in the potting mix, then you want to repot right away. It can get kind of yucky and slimy. So that's just something else you can add to kind of open it up a bit, and you'll know with practice what kind of a potting mix, how you can adjust it for your growing environment if based on the watering needs of your orchid. So here's a nice medium potting mix. I don't know if we ever talked about these, but these are just packing peanuts. You want to make sure that they are not the kind that dissolve in water, but they can really open up a potting mix and they don't break down and they don't absorb salts. So they can be really helpful. So here we have a nice bit of customized terrestrial potting mix. All right, the next mix is very, very simple. This is the Terrestrial basic mix from Marc Hachadourian. All it is just 3 parts medium bark, okay? 1 part horticulture charcoal and 1 part sponge rock, okay? So let's start with the basic mix. So we have 1, 2, 3, and 1 part sponge rock. This stuff is nasty to breathe, so. And 1 part charcoal. Okay. Okay, so here's what the basic mix looks like. Okay. And like I said, one thing that is very popular to add is this hydrotone, leca, clay pellets, whatever you want to call it. I'm just going to dump these in. And it just helps uphold the structure. It's slightly absorbent. And if you are doing a Phalaenopsis orchid and you needed to add more moisture, so we can look at this one. This is from Repot Me. So it's their Phalaenopsis AAA Gold Imperial Orchid Mix. And it has fir bark. I can see the hydrotone. It has really nice, high quality sphagnum moss. And if you're making it yourself, you can determine how much of the sphagnum moss you want to add. So just gonna sprinkle some of that in there. And that's pretty much, I might add a bit more sphagnum moss. And there you have a basic Phalaenopsis mix. If I was doing a Cattleya or Dendrobium, I would probably not add the sphagnum moss. So let's pretend like we did not add the sphagnum moss. A little bit is not going to hurt. And instead, I would probably add more of the hydrotone. So that is what I would do. Okay, now we're going to do one more. And this is for a Vanda orchid, okay? So in his notes, Marc Hachadourian in his book, Orchid Modern, he recommends doing the same exact mix for large rooted orchids like the Vanda, doing the same exact recipe, only you would use larger bark. And it is much larger. And this is also from Repot Me. So I just want to measure this. One easy way to remember is it adds up to 5. So you go 3, 1, 2, 3, and then 1 charcoal and 1 sponge rock. So here we go. Okay, so 3 parts large fir bark, 1 part sponge rock, 1 part horticulture charcoal. So there we go. And again, if you wanted to open it up a bit more, you could always add some bits. These are like, it's called medium. I would say these are about 1-inch pieces of cork. So you could even add these if you wanted to open it up some more. So those are your 3 basic recipes for orchid potting mixes and ways that you can customize them to fit your potting mix. I want to answer one more question that I get all of the time, and that is about, should you start with a wet potting mix or should you start with a dry potting mix? So what I have found is that you will find answers all over the place. Like, some people swear by a dry potting mix. Other people swear by a wet potting mix. So what I suggest is that you do what you like. Try it both ways and see which one you like. Some people say, let's think about what the potting mix is composed of. So they recommend like pre-soaking sphagnum moss. So that makes sense, right? Because it needs to be able to absorb water. Some people are very adamant about staying. Another consideration is, do they have pseudobulbs? Do they not have pseudobulbs? So if you are potting an orchid that wants to stay really wet, then start with a wet potting mix. Other people are like, well, this orchid has pseudobulbs, so you want to start with a dry potting mix. Other people, if you start with a dry potting mix, it will help the roots to recover. So there's lots of ideas and lots of ways, and people are successful both ways. One thing I would recommend would be to rinse the materials before you start. Especially, all of these things can be dusty. I would say the one that's probably the least dusty would be the cork. Cork isn't really very dusty, but definitely the sponge rock, this stuff gets very dusty. So, and I'd recommend wearing gloves because it can be stickery. I hope that this helps, and I hope that you are able to customize your potting mix and grow beautiful orchids. We'll talk to you later. If this video really resonated with you, then like it and subscribe to it, and you are more than welcome to join our community called Orchid Buds. And it is a really, really fun, great place to grow orchids together.